Hey everyone, I'm Scott Branley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how, despite times when she walked away from God, one woman discovered that God will never walk away from her or let her stray too far from his love. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad that you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce our special guest, Tonya Wirfs. Tanya, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for reaching out, for offering to share your story. I always love when Scott and I don't have to do the work to find people, and when they just come to us. It makes our job so much easier. And we get some really amazing stories that way too, like ones that we wouldn't have had access to if we just had to wait for them to come speak at a fireside that was local or something like that. So Thanks for being brave and for reaching out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about this podcast is, a lot of times people, when they have experiences in their lives, especially like spiritual experiences, they typically only share it with their family or their ward. Mm-hmm. And so this really gives people a chance to share their story on a larger scale so more people can benefit from it and be inspired by it. So we really appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, Ms. Tanya, before we get into our story today, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I have 5 kids. I live in the Kansas City, Missouri area. And I actually also have 5 stepkids. So we have a lot of older kids as well. Wow. They don't all live with us. And I love to go for walks. I love to read, and I like to read classic books or personal growth books, and I love to read with my kids. We like to play games a lot. I love to watercolor, and those are some of the things I really enjoy. And then I also am a coach, so I homeschool my daughter and my youngest daughter, and then I am a life coach, so I help moms with their habits and being able to create simple systems in their homes and free up time and energy so that they can really flourish in the business that God has given them. And I do that through 5-minute habits, through just breaking things down smaller. And I really love that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Wow. See, my kids are like old, like one's like getting ready to go on a mission. The other one's driving, and then the 11-year-old thinks she's 18. So I feel like I kind of missed that realm of parenting when life coaching for parents was like, more accessible. Like we didn't really have that back in my day, right? But I think it's so neat. Like it's so needed too. I feel like in any area of life that you want to improve, I am like a hardcore advocate of get yourself a coach. Like there's something powerful that happens with accountability, even if your coach maybe doesn't have like the most amazing credentials yet, or, maybe they're just starting their business or something like that. Like I love just any type of coaching. I know Scott's an advocate of it too. He likes to have mentors and coaches and things like that too. So it just helps so much. So that's awesome that's what you do.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that you know that. It's so valuable. I completely agree.
Yeah. So will you give me a freebie? Will you give me one of your 5-minute hack to making parenthood easier?
Yeah. Well, so what's the thing you're struggling with the most right now?
Oh, I think the typical one is just getting kids to do their chores without me nagging and reminding them $5 million.
Oh, okay.
Well, I want that one too.
I have a really good one, and I can send this to you, but there's, it's a little game, and it's called I'd Be Happy To. And so you like print off, it's all free, and you just print off these tokens, and you're teaching your kids basically anytime you ask them to do something to say, I'd be happy to, and they have to say it with a smile. And you give them a token, and then you have this list of things that they can earn, or snacks, or little, your kids are older, so you have to do it different than if you had little kids. But but that has worked really well with my kids. And it's also helped me too, because then I'm like, when they ask me to do something, I'm like, oh, I'd be happy to. And they like that response much better than, oh, I don't feel like doing that.
That's
So
really
it's
cool.
really easy. And I can send you, I have a podcast episode about it, and then with the link to get to it. So I'll
Sweet.
hook you up later.
Okay. I'll take it. I love it.
We'll put it in the notes so
Yeah,
other people
very
can
cool.
get it too.
Now,
Yeah.
is this your own podcast that you have, or were you a guest on another podcast?
No, so this is my podcast. It's 5-Minute
Oh.
Habits for Mom.
There you
My
go.
podcast.
We will definitely share that link too. So listeners, if you want some more tips, go head over to Miss Tanya's podcast as well after this. Awesome.
Cool. Well, we're really excited to hear your story, Tonya. So why don't we turn the time over to you?
Okay. Well, I grew up in the Midwest in the Kansas City area, and my parents got divorced when I was about 3 years old. My dad was a member, my whole life, but my mom joined the church when I was a baby, or maybe before that, because they got sealed in the temple when I was about 2 months old. And then I grew up mostly with my mom, and when I was about 5, my dad moved out to California, and so I didn't have him around, and so I didn't have that strong influence, with the gospel at that point. But I was baptized when I was 8. I remember like going to primary with him and hearing the music, and I can look back now and remember that, my testimony started building then, even though I didn't know it. And I had those stark differences, because mom's house was a lot different than dad's house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kind of helped me see that a little bit as a kid. But things really shifted for me when I was about 14. There were some things going on with my mom, and it was best for me to go and live with my dad. And he was very active in church. And so I had definitely already started getting into some trouble and hanging out with the wrong crowd, making choices that weren't good for me. And so in that year that I lived with my dad, my testimony really deepened and strengthened. And I don't know if I realized it then, but I can look back now and see that was a huge building block for me. And then, I'm one of those people that I think I'm a little different now, but for a lot of my life, I was either all in or I was all out. And so when I was all in, I was all in, and I was, going to church and doing all the things. And then when the next school year started, I decided that I wanted to go back and live with my mom. I just missed her. I had lived with her most of the time, and I missed her. And I didn't ever have the intention of not going back, not going to church anymore. But when you're in a different environment, little by little, you start to slip back. It's just like with food or anything else that we do, what we're surrounded with really does matter. And so I went back to live with my mom, got back in with not a very good crowd of kids, and just gradually started down that same path I was on before. And then I ended up at 18 years old, pregnant. I had to go tell my mom and dad, hey, you're going to be grandma and grandpa. And that was really, really hard for me. And I can still see, I'm 43 years old now, and I love my daughter and adore her, but I can see how not following the commandments really has impacted our life. I can still see the effects of it today. And, she's 24 years old. There's just things that stick with you that, from the choices that we make. And so after that, it took a few years, but when I was about 23, I had been, I was like, I drank socially, and, but I wasn't like a big partier, but definitely wasn't living my life, in alignment with the gospel at all. And I was one of those people that like the missionaries would knock on my door and I'm like, pretend like we're not home, and then there was one night I was out with some friends, and we were out drinking at a bar, and I just had this experience of like, even through all of that, I just had this spiritual experience of like, you don't belong here. And what are you doing? Like, why are you here? And you know where you need to go. And it was just like that. And my husband at the time was not a member of the church and really not interested in the church at all. But like I said, when I'm in, I'm in, and when I'm out, I'm out. And I was back in. And I, started the ball rolling. I called the bishop and went and met with him. And the week right before I went back to church, the missionaries came to my door, and I answered the door, and they asked me, they said, have you thought about going back to church? And I was like, you know what, I have, and I will be there on Sunday, and it was, I was just so excited, and it was just really great. And then about a year later, we went to the temple, received my endowments. I ended up getting divorced from my first husband, and pretty quickly within the next year ended up getting remarried again. Wow. To a member in my ward. And then, it was just, I thought that everything was just going to be great, right? We have these misperceptions sometimes. And at the time I didn't realize how depressed that I was. It wasn't until I started to come out of that I began to realize that. But those years were really hard. I mean, there's some good memories, but the years that we were married were really hard. We were married for about 13 years, and we had 4 kids together. And there was a point in, I was about 31 years old. So that was about 2012 when I just hit that place where I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I had talked to my dad one day on the phone, and I was telling him all the things that were going on and that I was struggling with. And he was like, I don't even recognize the Tanya that I knew growing up. Like, I don't recognize you anymore. It's not you. And that really hit me. And I knew I needed to do something different. I was tired of just talking about doing things different. And I knew that I needed to make some big changes and start actually doing them. And so that's when I started my first business, which was an essential oils business. And I got out of my shell. You can't go teach essential oils classes in your jammies. You have to get up and get ready, because most of the time I'm like, at the end of the day, still like in my, pajamas or workout clothes, and just feeling like a hot mess, and just, I have all the kids around me. Everybody it was a mess most of the time. And so I started allowing God to really help me pull out of that. And so it was a really good thing, but it also got me started on this path of, like energy work and things like that. Cause I was in the essential oils world, and everything started out innocently enough. And then over time, some of the new age stuff and things that I was getting into, it wasn't all bad, but it weakened my testimony. And I didn't realize it. And I was going to those things instead of going to the temple, or, not that I did go to the temple, but I was, what I mean? I was going to those things more than I was going to the Lord. And I wasn't relying on him in the way that I needed to. Obviously, I didn't realize that at the time. And I know there was about a year, probably like 2014 or so, where I was really struggling in my testimony. And I remember talking to friends, and they're like, no, just stay here, stay with us, don't walk away. And I'm, just kind of in that limbo land. And then we moved out to Logan, Utah, the whole family in 2015. And then when we came back, things things happened in my marriage, and my testimony was in a weak place, and we ended up walking away from the church. And that was really hard. I was thinking about that this morning, how I remember like when I decided to quit wearing my garments, and that was just a pivotal moment. It hurt. Like I was it was almost like the whole thing feels almost like an out of body experience. Like I was there and I was making these decisions, but there was, probably my spirit was like, Tanya, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? This isn't you. And so we lived that way, for a few years, and then things really started falling apart in my marriage. And I think I think that probably would have happened whether I had left church or not. But there are definitely things that if I would have stayed in, I would have done differently for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was in the fall of like 2017. Is when we ended up separating, and then our divorce was filed in 2018. And so I look back now and I realize that I had like a relationship addiction from the time I was young, just trying to fill in for some, things that were missing in my life. And so I was always in a relationship, jumping into a new one. And so even after we separated, I was, in a couple of relationships after that. And in early in 2019, earlier that year, I had started, went on an antidepressant because I was still really struggling. I was just so overwhelmed being by myself with the kids. And I think that took the edge off enough that I could feel the spirit a little bit more. And this is where I see God in my story, even though I was not living my life according to his, living my life in the gospel and the commandments. He will work with anything. He will work with us wherever we are. And, even though I was living, I had a boyfriend and things like that, through them, he brought me back to the Lord, because I had felt like the Lord was far away and that I wasn't worthy of being in his presence. And so these relationships brought me back to the Lord. And then I hit a place where I was just feeling like something's got to change. Things just don't feel right. And a friend had recommended this book to me, and I listened to it for like probably 5 or 10 minutes. And it was just about how we can actually become like Christ. And just this light bulb went off, and I was like, well, I don't need this book. I know where I need to go if I want to become like Christ. And so that was, that second big light bulb moment for me. And this time was a lot more painful because I had been to the temple, I had broken my covenants. And I knew that it was, the first time it was like, a little slap on the wrist, and no, it wasn't a big deal because I hadn't been to the temple yet. And so this time I knew it was going to be a bigger deal, but I was just like, I just knew it in my whole being. So I made an appointment, met with Bishop. Like probably a week later, we had, disciplinary counsel. I ended up being disfellowshipped for a year. But as hard as that was, to sit there with my kids and not be able to take the sacrament, I was just so happy to be there. And I knew that the Lord was watching over me. And I can look back at that time and I just see how like it was just a slippery slope, how it was just like these flaxing cords and these, I had gotten all tied up. And because of this experience, I know what it's like to walk with the adversary, and he's not somebody I want to be walking with. And the Lord like really brought me out of hell, like out of this really horrible place. And since then it's just been just incredible what he has been able to do with my life. I mean, I just feel like because I've been in such dark places, and I see things so much differently now. Like I really resonate with Paul and Alma the Younger. I mean, I didn't do the same things they did. I wasn't like actively fighting against the church, but I can resonate with how hard that would have been for them, and just how when it happens this way, which I don't recommend, I don't recommend doing it this way, but when it does happen this way, this has made my testimony just resolute. Before, like during the time I was inactive the second time, I remember just thinking like, how could I have stood up at that pulpit and bore a testimony of Christ, and now it's just not there anymore? I could never reconcile that. And it just, I'm just so happy. So it was in 2019 is when we started coming back, and my son he wasn't hadn't been baptized when he was 8, so it was a convert baptism, which actually was a huge blessing because he had needed to have the discussions with the missionaries, and there was this one missionary, his name was Elder Burkett, and he just really clicked with my son. And I know that like at some point in his life, like that will be a pivotal, time in his life that my son will look back on. And we all do. We just loved him, and he was with us for a while. And so I can look back and I can see all these places where the Lord was there, even though I didn't realize it. And like we had, they were still called, I think this was right around the time the changes were being made to ministering brothers and sisters. So, I had a home teacher. It is the only time in my whole church life where I had like a faithful home teacher that came and visited us every month. And he was kind of that bridge. And then I look back at my second youngest daughter, and the whole time, I really think it started around the time we left church. And then she would ask me every single night to sing her, "I Am a Child of God." And I did that whole time, when we weren't going to church. And when we started coming back, I noticed that she didn't ask me to sing that song anymore. So like it was, just these little things that the Lord was there. He's always there. He's always working things out for our good. And I've had so many times, even still to this day, where I'm like, I wish that I hadn't made that decision or had to go through that. But at the same time, if I can help even just one person with the experiences that I've had, then it's worth it, and I really feel like it will be helpful for my family. And not that there's anything wrong with always staying on the straight and narrow path. I think that's great, but a lot of people don't. And so if they can have someone that they can connect with, that's like, yep, I've done that, or I understand that, or yeah, I can really just empathize. It's given me this ability to empathize with people in a way that I wouldn't have had before. I remember like not too long after I started going back to church, I had gone to a stake relief society meeting, and I was talking to a friend who was really struggling. Her husband had left the church, and she was in a place where she was just really struggling with her testimony, and we connected. And she told me, I know where, that you've had a lot of things and that you haven't always stayed here. And that really helped her to feel like I could be understanding of where she was, and she needed that.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Scott.
I've got questions too. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. Well, I might steal your question. You don't know, but okay. I'm wondering because I have family and friends who were all in with the church, and then they either completely left the church or they've just stopped going, like they've just not wanted anything to do with it. And while that always makes me like super sad for them, and it makes me even more sad for the kids who were used to a routine. And then all of a sudden, because the parents are going through whatever they're going through, now the kids are forced to follow them on that journey. Right. And it's always like just broken my heart. And for me, I think I'm a little more sensitive to it just because I grew up in a really inactive family. And so I had to like fight to get to church, and I had to find my own rides. And I would go, when I was 6 years old, I would like ride with someone. And then we didn't grow up in Utah where we could just, always have churches around. It was like very limited membership. There were very few people. And thankfully I had a best friend whose mom was always there to love on me and just to take me to church. And so it really was like my huge saving grace. But I remember being a kid and wanting to increase my testimony and wanting to have that home where we said prayer and we had family home evening and my parents would go to church with me, and I didn't have to sit with non-family members in a pew on Sunday. And there were all these things that like hurt me so much as a kid because my parents didn't want to go to church, And so from a mom's perspective, I'm wondering, did you see changes in your kids? Like, did your kids, were they like, woohoo, now we don't have to go to church? Or were they kind of like, wait, what's going on? Or did they stay really quiet? Or, like, what did that look like as a parent with your kids changing so much and then changing back, right? Going back once you've established a new routine of now, we're not going and now we are going. How did that affect them, I guess?
Oh, that's a good question. So honestly, I don't remember a whole lot about that time when I left. I just was not in a good place. And I know it affected them though. And I can see that now in some things. And it was a pivotal time in their childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I know it affected them like the way that they looked at me too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was always solid. And then to see me, occasionally smoking or, going like drinking occasionally, or, I know that it really did affect them. I can see that. And I think it shook them. I can see that in like, especially my older kids. But coming back, honestly, they just really embraced it. They really did. I mean, I didn't make my son get baptized. I encouraged and invited, but I didn't force that. I wanted it to be his decision. And they really embraced it. And I mean, there were some times like that where things were tricky, but overall, they really did embrace it.
Okay.
That's cool. That was one of my questions, Alicia. But my other question was, it seems like when, like, I had two families leave the church when I was the bishop. And part of what, like, I felt was like they were free, like they had this idea that not going to church was going to make them free. Was that something that you thought, and like, can you explain more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I do remember thinking that in some ways at that point. Like now I can wear whatever I want. I can wear tank tops again. And, I can relate with this friend or that friend. And it's interesting because while it was a little bit fun for a minute, it was flat. Like there was nothing there. And it really wasn't freedom. It's just, a lot of times people think freedom is doing whatever I want, whenever I want to do it. And I have found that is absolutely not freedom. I mean, when we follow God's commandments, that's when we have freedom. I have freedom now in a lot of areas. And that definitely was not freedom, like being able to do whatever I wanted whenever. And it the connections I made were shallow, and it just, it definitely wasn't what I thought. But at first, and I've heard other people talk about this, it feels free a little bit because you no longer are in that wrestle. Because most people have been wrestling for a period of time with that decision. And so you're no longer in that wrestle. And the spirit kind of withdraws a little bit. You've made that decision. It's, God's still there, but he never, ever interferes with our agency. He always gives us that. So, but yeah, it's not freedom, but I do remember thinking that it would be.
So now that you've gone through it and you look back, can you see where, like, it's almost, in my mind, it looks like it's freedom, but it's actually bondage?
Yes.
I haven't lived through that, so I can't, but that's what it seems like from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, well, it's like, and it happened, God works little by little, but so does the enemy. He works little by little. It's not like he came out and presented, hey, Tanya, try this. It was like these little things over time. And then gradually, then it's like, then he had me, and it took things getting really bad for me to wake up and be like, whoa, I don't want that. And so that's why I can really advocate, especially for like our youth, just how critical it is, to keep the law of chastity and, there really is purpose and safety and freedom in that, because otherwise it's bondage and you're no longer making your choices anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You lose that gift of agency. That's exactly what Satan is wanting from us, is he's wanting to take our agency. And when we don't follow God's laws, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're handing it over to him. And you don't even a lot of times realize it until it gets really bad.
Mm-hmm. I really like how you talked about just being in that place of indecision where you're like, oh, I'm doing this, but I kind of want to do that. And I'm wondering about this and I'm wondering about that. And it really is, I've had a few different times in my life, particularly one where I was in that state of indecision on whether or not to divorce my husband. We went through our rough patch and stuff like that. And I feel you, like the being in the indecision is so terrible that any decision that you finally make that like stops that indecision feels like freedom. And it doesn't mean it's the right decision, but it's a decision is being made. And now all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I can be, like you were saying, all in on this decision. And I don't have to sit there and battle with the what ifs and should I, would I, could I, will I, will he, will they, will whatever. And I think that sometimes that's where Satan gets us, right? Like sometimes he's not telling us that everything is all wrong. He's just kind of like you said, like just the flaxing cord. It's just like a little thing like, oh, it is 100 degrees outside. It would be really nice to not have to have an extra layer on. It would be really nice. Let's just stay in our workout clothes all day long rather than changing and putting our garments back on after we work out, or let's just hang out in our swimsuit, cover ups and stuff like that, because we might go back outside in like 4 or 5 hours and it's totally fine. And we start like justifying, and then we start like, oh yeah, that feels really good, doesn't it? And why do I have to have sweaty garments on? And why do I have to, and I don't know, like things like, oh, church starts so early in the morning and it never changes times because we're in a weird ward that doesn't ever want to go to church at 11 o'clock. And so it's like, Satan really gets you. He really gets you with like these little tiny, like what ifs and should I's and maybes. And he just kind of pings. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's where we start slipping, right? Like that's where we start kind of entertaining the idea of something different. And so if we were just to make the solid decision, and almost, I've said this before, like when we have those little what if thoughts and when we have those moments of, oh, I just wish this, or I just wish that, instead of assigning that voice in your head to yourself as your thoughts and your intentions and your beliefs and your wants and your desires, just give it to someone else. You can call him Satan. You can call him, who Clarissa has a name. What's Clarissa's name? She had a name for hers, like Miss Dakota or something. I don't know. Something weird, right? So anyway,
like your evil twin.
Yeah, exactly. Like instead flip it around and be like, I'm having a conversation with someone right now who's trying to make me think that it's me, but it's not me, And I think that once you switch back to that decisions being made, right, where there is no more what ifs, it just makes things a lot easier. Even who was it? Dean Graziosi. I don't know, Scott, you know of him? Anyway, he's like this entrepreneur guy or whatever. And I believe it was him who said he made a decision a long time ago that what he was going to wear every day was the same t-shirt and the same pair of jeans. So he got like 10 pairs of the same shirts and the same jeans because he doesn't want to have to make that decision unless he's going to a special event or something like that. He's like, why am I going to waste time making a decision? Now I don't have to stand there and think, well, do I want to wear this? Do I want to wear that? What about? And so he literally wears like a black t-shirt and blue jeans all the time. And now that's not for me. It would save a lot of time making decisions. My husband would appreciate it. But I think the same can be applied to the gospel, right? Like if you just make the decision, like we're doing this, I'm doing this, or I'm not doing that. There is no what if or should I or will I. just make that decision and you'll be surprised how much weight is lifted off of your shoulders from not having to be an indecision.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and being really committed to it, like I was just talking to my husband about that earlier. He has an addiction that he deals with. And he was just talking to our new bishop who was encouraging him to, make a list of the things that you are going to do and the things that you're not going to do. And when you can stick to that and be in integrity with those things that nobody else is going to see, when you, in your private time, that was one of my favorite quotes from this last conference about talking about, being in integrity in your private time, like what you do in that time matters when people aren't watching. And when you can get in integrity and keep those commitments and those promises that you make that are just between you and God, nobody else would ever know. And you're keeping those, like, to me, that's when the magic really starts to happen. And life just starts to feel really good because you're doing what you say you're going to do. And those decisions that you've made, you're sticking to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got another question for you about flaxen cords and the word of wisdom. So since you kind of brought it up already, I've noticed that when a lot of people fall away, one of the first things they do is they start drinking coffee. They start drinking. It sounded like you smoked a little bit too, but can you kind of talk to us about the first time you did that when you made the decision not to come back? Like how does that happen?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that for a while. I think it's just almost like, for me, it felt like, okay, these doors that were closed are now open. And so I did drink coffee. And I wasn't ever a big drinker, but I would drink socially. So people, there were people in my life that I loved and that I didn't feel as connected with. But now that I'm, living this different lifestyle, felt like, this would help me connect with them. So I remember, more socially drinking. But it felt weird, because it had been years since I had done that. And the other thing that was of a lot of value is that because I had that stark contrast of so many years where I wasn't drinking or drinking coffee or smoking, I could really see how it felt in my body. And so drinking coffee, I would drink coffee, and coffee's so addictive. And at least it was for me. And it wasn't something that I could just do in moderation. Like drinking alcohol, I could do in moderation. Even smoking, I could smoke occasionally, and that was never hard for me. But coffee, I had to really watch, because I noticed that it made me really mean and grouchy. Like I would get really grumpy and impatient with my kids when I would start drinking it on a regular basis. And once I started drinking it, then it was really hard to dial back in and quit. So it's interesting. But I think that's another thing where, Satan kind of comes in the back door, and then the more that he can get you doing those things that are, not keeping your commitments and covenants, then he's got you just a little bit more, and it makes it just a little bit harder for you to make that decision to come back.
Was there a time when you first started doing it where you would have a conflict, even though you'd made the decision to leave the church? Or were you just forget it, I'm just doing it?
Honestly, I don't remember. I definitely remember feeling that when I stopped wearing my garments. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sure there was probably part of me that's like, Tanya, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? This is not you. And I know my kids, to this day, they still give me a rough time about it. They're like, you remember when you used to smoke on the front porch, Mom? Or, they've got to bring all this stuff up. Like, yes, I remember. Thank you for reminding everybody in the room about that.
Oh, man.
What about other members of the church that once you made the decision to leave, and then did you do that in front of them? What was that like being on the other side?
Yeah. So I remembered telling my dad, and it's interesting. I feel like I have good insight for that, for like someone who's going through this, because I felt very judged, right? And I know now, and I realize that that's not what anybody was meaning to do. But that's again where Satan will kind of get in your head and, make you think they're judging you. And I don't remember exactly what my dad said, but whatever he said made me just feel, and I know he didn't mean it to be that way, but the way I took it was just, really negative. And there was somebody that said that he had said something about me, so I just, allowed that to ruminate in my head and have bad feelings. And now I realize that it wasn't my dad at all. But definitely it's a real thing. So like now I have such a heart for, like, when we have, I've been in primary presidencies a couple times since then. And for the kids who are inactive and for their families, because I feel like I can understand, like, in a way that someone who's always been an active member can't understand, like how to phrase things and how to say things in a way. I mean, obviously I don't have any control over how someone else takes things, but I can know that that is a very good possibility that they're going to feel judged by me. And I can ask Heavenly Father to help me to say things in a way to hopefully minimize that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want to bring you around because I'm sure that there's listeners who are like, Alicia, ask the question. Because I will be very loud about the fact that I love not all energy work, certain types of energy-esque work. I love certain types of those things. And like Eastern and Western, like I love kind of like learning from all the different faiths and religions and modalities. And I'm a really big believer that all good comes from God. Right. However, you have to be so careful because, again, Heavenly Father knows that Satan will get in there in the good, and he'll start kind of just pulling you a little further until all of a sudden you're no longer relying on God. You're no longer relying on the foundations of the gospel, and you're no longer relying on the testimony that, should be super sacred to you and super strong. And you start kind of opening yourself up to a world of other things that do not produce good, And so I just want to put a disclaimer out there. You and I don't believe that like oils are bad, right? Like it's
right.
They come from the earth. They do good things, but there are certain modalities that definitely do take you away from the gospel, take you away from Heavenly Father, and put your faith and your trust in those things and in not in the creator of those things. Right. So
Right.
how for you, and I do believe that this is one of those things that we need more information on, right? Because there's so much stuff coming forward now that it's really, really hard to determine like what exactly falls into the category of bad energy work and what exactly falls into the category of not being in line with the gospel, things like that, right? But for you, how did you did you have any warnings when you were going through it, when you were opening up yourself to these other types of work and stuff? Did you have any inklings where you're like, oh, maybe this path isn't such a good one? Or was it more like you kept searching for good, so all you saw was the good in it, and you weren't listening to what the Spirit was telling you was not good? How did that shift?
That's a good question. So I think there were some times where there was a specific podcast that I remember listening to, and it wasn't necessarily about energy work, but it was more like she was into like shamanism and things like that, and I remember, and just kind of like that idea of because in that world, there's a lot of, and I'm not saying necessarily energy work, but just in the new age world, there's a lot of,
Right.
there's really no good or bad. Everything is just neutral. Right.
Right.
And so, I remember one day though, listening to this podcast, and I can't remember now what it was, but I remember just that almost like this, I took a step down. I remember that physical feeling. And I remember, being like, oh, I probably shouldn't do this, but I did it anyway. I remember that feeling and just knowing like I'm not going in the right direction, but it was like a train that had already taken off from the station. So it wasn't just energy work. That was just a piece of it. And what I have found is like, I still love essential oils. You'll find them all over my house.
Yep.
But that doesn't ever replace God for me anymore. And it's so easy. I have seen so many people fall away from the church through these pathways. People that, you never would have thought. And I was one of those people that you never would have thought that I would have fallen away in the way that I did. And it started out innocently enough, of like, have you heard of the book Emotions Buried Alive, Never Die, right? Like the concept that we have when we bury our emotions, that they come back in our body in a, causing physical ailments. I still believe that is true.
Yeah, I do too.
But so there's, it's not that there was enough truth in what I was doing that I actually, in a lot of things, felt like God was guiding me into these things. And what I have found now is that I don't need those things. Like, going for walks and going consistently to the temple and being really consistent in my habits and prayers and, and reading my scriptures, and getting priesthood blessings and, I just don't need those. I just don't need those things anymore. And, I still know people who do things and they're still active in the church and happy. And, it's none of my business what anybody else does. I just know for me that, that I can see that was a part of it for me. And so I'm really careful. I'm careful now about what I get involved in, even what I read. If I'm studying a new topic, I make sure I'm grounded in scripture and conference talks and, things before I'll go outside of that and read other books, because I know that I'm not immune to being deceived. And something I teach my kids all the time is like, there's so many things out there that can deceive you, and they'll seem okay at first. And then, little by little, you can end up in a place where you're like, whoa, how did I get here? So,
yeah, I really like that, if you're going to study these other things, if you're going to learn about them, and not that you need to get like super into them, but just having those conversations and opening up. And I think especially even, I mean, outside of like energy work stuff or whatever else, like you can look at like the history of the church. You can look at all of these like really taboo subjects that people are leaving the church because they found out this, that, or the other from the past, or they don't like the way that the church is spending or not spending, tithing money, or like all of these like really taboo subjects. I think that it's one of those things where like our Heavenly Father wants us to be informed. He wants us to know about the truth of all of these things. He wants us to know where other people find him, right? Because we know that there are so many other churches and religions and faiths and even non-faiths, right? There's so many other ways that people can feel the Spirit. They can feel God. And those are all great things. But there's a place where our Heavenly Father will give us the most tools, the most resources, the most truth for us to become our most complete self. And that is within the gospel, so while there are good things outside of there, I almost think sometimes, like you said, you were taking a step down, right? Like, yeah, you were opening up these new perspectives and these new things, but it was like, okay, but you're not elevating yourself. You're actually just kind of stepping back or stepping down. So I really like that you had said to be grounded first in your scripture study, be grounded in the gospel, grounded in your testimony, always kind of like check back in and just, for me, I always tell my kids, if you're going to research something, I want you to research it in such a way where you ask yourself, how can this bring me closer to God?
Mm-hmm.
How can this edify the truth that I already know? I'm not looking to replace it or anything else, but how does this edify my testimony? How does this strengthen my testimony? And I think when you approach things like that, then all of a sudden you can see the things that aren't, gonna be in line with what Heavenly Father's plan is for you. And we've had guests on the show who have talked about going on the fringe and who have talked about doing things that were outside of like the normal scope of the gospel. For them specifically, they feel that was part of their path because it brought them back. It was almost like they didn't know what else to do and they had to go to these places because the decisions that they were making were not allowing them to feel the spirit where they were at. And so sometimes they had to go off course in order to get themselves back on course. Not that they were ever looking to get off course, right? Like they weren't looking to stray from the gospel, but it was just something like Alma the Younger, right? Like obviously sometimes because Heavenly Father knows us, he knows we are just going to do some dumb stuff. Like we're just going to, like you said, like we're out of body experience. Why did I do that? Why am I doing that? Stop doing that, Alicia. But I think that he just knows that sometimes we're just going to do dumb stuff and that's okay. Cause he's got detours upon detours upon detours where he can bring us back. However, why drive down those roads that are under construction on a nice smooth highway? Like you're going to hurt your neck, you're going to hurt your back, you're going to have to pee, and there's going to be no place to stop. So just stay on the straight and narrow.
I think just using discernment, but I love like, anchoring yourself into the gospel and then just having that discernment and judging everything that you learn, because you should learn different things, right? There's good in all things, like you said. But just having that discernment and judging everything based on the gospel, I think helps you stay rooted in the truth.
Yeah. Well, and because I had fallen so far away, it took a while. Like for a long time, all I would read was scripture and conference talks because that's what I needed to get anchored and solid. I mean, even now as I'm, working on my money mindset and, living more abundantly, a lot will go to conference talks. There's a lot of good conference talks and, and BYU speeches and things around that. It doesn't mean I can't learn outside of that, but that's where I want my foundation to be, or there's some scriptures that are really good around that. And I want that to be my foundation, and then allowing God to take me, to these other places. And now, I don't know, like 5 years back in faithfully being back in church. And now I trust myself, and it took a long time for me, I can always trust God, but can I trust myself? I did, because of everything that happened, I didn't. And now I do, I trust myself to make decisions.
Wow. I really like that a lot. Kind of telling yourself in the moment, I am susceptible. I am gullible. I can be deceived. So let's keep me in a place where I'm limiting that risk and also letting me strengthen my own, my own testimony and my own knowledge of who I am and who God is and where I'm supposed to be and stuff like that before I allow myself to open up more to those things that, might be a little iffy. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we live in the latter days. We know that. And so we have to be so careful. I'm always telling my kids, I'm like, we don't have time to mess around. We have to, not that we have to be perfect or anything, but we need to be really striving because Satan wants you, and he's really after, you can see it in the family, and we have to be vigilant and paying, I don't want my focus to be on him, but I think it's very important I pay attention to the fact that he is there. Like I was mentioning earlier, that's one of the things that kind of is in that sometimes in the personal growth world and, in that new age world, is that there's no good or bad. Yeah, just do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it, no accountability, it's whatever, just do your thing. And that it's really, really dangerous. That kind of neutrality is very dangerous.
Yeah. Very true. Wow.
Well, we went on a really big detour, but coming back, is there more of your story?
Yeah. So we'll get to like the fun, good parts now. So let's see. So in 2019, I came back, and then and I had like a solid year where I was like, okay, I am not going to date anyone. I'm just going to be me and the kids. And I really needed that. That was very hard for me, but it was exactly what I needed. And then perfect timing during when COVID started, God was kind of like starting to, actually he told my dad was like, I think you might want to consider like dating again and looking at getting remarried. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't want to do that again. I don't need that. But it kind of opened my heart and planted that seed. And so that was when COVID had first started in 2020. And so I ended up, doing some online dating, and I ended up meeting my husband, and he lived in Nevada and I lived here in Kansas City. And, but I was so careful this time. I mean, the whole time I held it like open handed, like if this is supposed to work out, then keep bringing everything together. And if it's not, then just make it all fall apart. And just that whole time, he just constantly just brought us together, back together all the time. It was really beautiful. And so I've been remarried now for like 3.5 years. And I'm not going to tell you that it's been easy, because we're blending a family, and that is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. Mm-hmm. But the Heavenly Father really helped me make sure the most important qualities were there with my husband. And that has proven to work out really well. I mean, I've had moments where I'm like, what was I thinking? Why did I get remarried again? God, like having these doubts. But right now we're in a place where I'm starting to see things, shift and see just these miracles. Mm-hmm. And God has just been so incredible. And I've just found like following his commandments, and even the things that aren't necessarily general commandments to everyone, but his personal revelation to me, and becoming very disciplined. Like about 2.5 years ago, started becoming really disciplined with my food. And that has been a huge blessing. Like it has given me so much freedom. It would seem to others like it's too strict. It's too, I can't just eat whatever I want whenever I want to eat it, but because God knew that this is what I needed. And so it's just opened things up for me to be able to grow my business, because, that's an important part that I think I forgot, like to mention. So in 2016, when we had moved back to Kansas City from Logan, I remember just sitting in church one day in April, and it was like my head opened up, and it was just like getting all these downloads from Heavenly Father of like the ways that he wanted me to serve mothers. And because I've just had this huge heart for mothers because of all the things I've been through. And I could just see this vision of this work he wanted me to do. It was 2 months after that is when everything fell apart and we left church. And the whole time that I was out of church, I'm still trying to like get this going and get this business going, and it wasn't working. Like it just, nothing would click, nothing would work. And I know now it's because Heavenly Father didn't want me to share the message that way. Mm. He wanted me to share it the way that I'm sharing it now, and it needed to wait. And so it's been actually just about 2 years ago that, because I have this little thing, it's called a 5-year journal, and you write a few lines a day about everything that happened. So at the end of 5 years, you'll have 5 years worth of memory. So I know it was 2 years ago yesterday that I hired my first business coach to start really bringing this business out into the world that God had put on my heart so long ago. And I know that I couldn't have done that if I hadn't made those changes with my food. And before that, if I hadn't, come back to church. I mean, I know that all these things and these ways that he's helped me become disciplined have that they're helping me to do his work, because he's given me a purpose and a calling. And like when President Nelson talks about that, and I just feel so lit up. I know that before I came here that he gave me this work to do on this earth. And not that he wanted me to go down the path that I did or chose that for me, but but he will work that all out to help me be able to do his work. That's all I want to do. I want to be a mother and a wife, and I want to do this work and help bring his daughters back to him, help them with their habits, help them to be solid, because they're my lifeline. Like, used to, I'd go on vacation or things would get crazy, and then I'd throw all my habits and everything would just fly out the window. And now I'm solid. And it wasn't, just in one day. It was a little bit at a time. And then I would have like some big leaps, but they were all preceded by these small and simple steps. And now there's challenges. I'm sure there will be more to come. It's part of life. I mean, with money and things like that, like something good will happen and then something not so great happens, and it's really easy to focus on the not so great things. But God has just given me this ability, and it's all through him. I couldn't do any of these things without him. The way I eat now, like, I couldn't do that without him. It's all him. It's just literally all I've done is say, okay, I'm handing it over to you and I'll do what you ask. And I know the value of that now.
Wow. That sounds awesome. I wish I could just get a download. That would be so helpful. I feel like I'm always like thinking of things, but it would be nice if I could just get it just in my head. That would be amazing. But
it doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah.
It usually doesn't.
I do love how, you talk about these diligent tasks. I think that that's really what the gospel is kind of built on too, right? Like, you have those primary answers, like read your scriptures, say your prayer, go to church, take the sacrament, repent, and then repent again, and it's sometimes people look at it and they're like, oh, it's so redundant. It's so boring. It's so this, it's so that, but it's really because that's the way that we're designed. Like, in order to achieve success and growth and to become, like every bit of who we are supposed to be, we need to have those tasks that we do over and over and over again, so that we can build those synapses in our brains, so that our brains can just get completely wired in tightly in order to see significant change in our life for the better, and to put us in a place where we can actually network with other people and help them, to be better too. So I love that you've taken that step.
And it brings so much joy. I mean, people will think they look at the way that I eat, and they look at, the way that I plan my week out every week, and I manage, I work on my time, and I always write it in pencil because things change and I might need to change things. But doing these things and becoming disciplined that way, it really brings freedom, and it has brought me so much joy. Like, I love actually living my life. I love doing the dishes and the laundry and the, just the day-to-day life with kids. Whereas before, it just so often felt like drudgery, and it felt like, oh, now we've got to, I gotta make dinner. I gotta, just life just didn't feel good. But that's such a big part of our life, is these mundane things. And honestly, like, a couple of years ago, I did a service mission in the temple for about 9 months, and I loved it. Once a week, I would just go and I cleaned all the bathrooms in the Kansas City temple, and it was just like my time with God. It was quiet, and it was amazing. And one of the unexpected blessings that I received after that temple service was that I was cleaning the bathroom one day, and I was like, I don't hate doing this anymore. Like, like all of those things that we do in life, they can, when we invite God into it with us, they can be great. I mean, yeah, there's times I'm tired and I don't feel like doing things. I mean, but most of the time I can get myself back to that place with God because I bookend my day with him. I start and end, and then because I've gotten solid in that, it's so much easier for me to bring him in and allow him in all those other moments when I'm about to get angry at a kid and I'm like, oh no, wait a minute, like try to imagine what she's actually going through. The Lord knows exactly what she's going through right now. So how can I respond to her instead of just reacting, in the old way that I used to? And I'm not perfect. I still make lots of mistakes all the time. But it's just given me this ability to be able to, just recover and do things so much differently.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I really like that analogy of bookending your day with God, like starting and ending. I don't know. I think it's one of those like little things that so many of us don't do. We get up and we're running late, and so we rush, and then we're exhausted at the end of the day. So then we just fall asleep, and it's like you've missed these opportunities where you can really check in with the Lord. And I think that, if anything, if people could start bookending their days with God, they'd probably see a significant change for the better,
Well, and usually what we're doing is we're getting on our phone first thing in the morning, and then, we're ending our day on our phone because it's easier for our brain than taking that time, and that's why, like, when I work with women, I help them start really, really small, because a lot of times we think, oh, I have to go spend an hour, and yeah, that's great. You can work your way up to that, but you need to start really, really small and have those, just get good at a couple minutes, 5 minutes, and then you can, increase and deepen what you're doing. But trying to go too hard, too fast, we fall, so many of us do that. I did it for years. I read all these personal growth books and I think, oh, I'm going to go from here to here like that, and fall flat on my face. And so it wasn't until I learned how to slow down and because the Lord never rushed. I mean, can you think of a time he was ever in a hurry?
Nope.
No, we're taught to model our life after him. He wasn't busy and in a hurry. I mean, yes, he had a lot of things going on, right? And there were times he was so exhausted. I mean, he slept during a storm, right? But he was never in a hurry. And that's what I'm always checking in. Like, I don't want to have a hurried heart. I'm working on unhurrying my heart so that I want to be with him. I mean, we have a responsibility right now to usher in the millennium, and that starts inside of each one of us. It will happen as we are ready. And it's because we'll be able to resist temptation, not because, we're going to all bind Satan up and he's not going to be able to hurt us. It's because we will be resisting him. And that comes through, those spiritual habits, those spiritual disciplines.
Wow. I really love that.
That's cool. I like that you've kind of become an advocate for helping, women to be more productive, and because they have a lot on their plates. I know my wife is overwhelmed 99% of the time. And if she just doesn't even know where to start because it's just so overwhelming. I'm sure she's not the only one.
No, she's not. She is not.
Well, and it's hard for me to even fathom liking cooking or dishes or laundry. I'm like,
I know.
Oh, but it's so true. I mean, if I could actually enjoy it, like my mom does. She's like one of the, like, she likes doing all that stuff. And I just keep thinking, oh, like, please just come live with me again because you could take over. Or, please, Lord, just let wealth and abundance fall in my lap so I can just hire someone else who enjoys it. But
I totally get that. I mean, I felt like that for years. I remember just thinking, I just need my business to get strong enough that I can afford to pay a housekeeper. But for me, at least, I have found that, and I might eventually pay somebody to come in and clean my house. But I think God knew that I needed that time. We need those tasks where you don't have to think, because, another thing somebody has said to me before, which is that motherhood was made to be interruptible, right? Like if you're doing the dishes and you get interrupted, you can easily come back and pick up and see where you left off. And there's all these different tasks. If we can just break them down small enough, they won't feel quite so overwhelming. I used to hate cooking, and I'm certainly not Martha Stewart now. Like it's not my favorite thing in the world to do, but I don't hate it anymore. I don't loathe it. And, I've been able to get to the place where I am organized in it. And I can, get my meals planned. And it used to be really hard for me to do that. And now I can sit down and do that. And it just makes life, that's a big thing that we do is eat, so when we can have that not feel so heavy and so hard, then it frees up all this energy and space for us to do these other things that are going to bring so much goodness into the world, and time for us to, because you're right, Scott, like, we have so much going on. There's always things. But when we can utilize those times when we have to do these things anyway, and just be able to let go of that overwhelm and the pressure that we put on ourselves to do everything in a certain amount of time, and be able to go to bed at night and say, okay, what I did today was enough. It could have been more and it could have been less, but it was enough. And you leave today and then start over again, the next day.
Wow.
That's cool.
Well, I love this. I'm definitely going to have to go check out all of your podcasts that you've done and just kind of get some more tips and tricks and stuff like that on how to be a good mom, because there's room for improvement. My children.
Yep. I need to learn how to be a better mom too.
Oh, well, Miss Tonya, is there anything that you'd like to leave with listeners? Like any last words before we wrap it up today?
Yes, I just want you to know that you can never go any lower than the Savior can pick you up. Like, the enemy will tell you that you're not good enough, that you've done too many things, that you can't come back, and he'll have little clever ways of saying that in your own voice. But you never ever can go below him. The Lord, he is always under there to catch you. He's gone below everything that we've ever done, and he's always calling to us. He will never violate our agency, and he will work anything that you've done and your choices you've made or things that have happened to you, that he can work it all out for your good. He can redeem those times in your life. And I still don't understand how it all works. And I don't have to, even though I want to understand everything, but we don't have to understand it. He's always there. He loves us and he wants us all back with him. And he will show us just that one next step. We don't have to make it too big. Just that, what's that? That's a thing I'm always asking God, okay, when things feel way too big and I've gotten myself overwhelmed and I'm like, okay, what's just that one next thing? And he will always show me that one thing that I need to do, that I can get back with him. And that makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that. Well, thank you, Tonya, so much for coming on today, for sharing your story and for sharing, I feel like there were so many good insights, so many good nuggets that we got out of our conversation with you, and lots of bumper stickers we can make. I swear, one day we're going to do that. I don't know. If you guys are in the bumper sticker business, let us know.
Actually, I just found out that I think Missouri, or either Kansas City or Missouri, actually invented the bumper sticker. Who knew? What a random
That's
fact.
interesting. Oh, that's cool.
We really appreciate your insight and even some of our direct questions that we don't really ask very often, but it was nice to get your input and your thoughts on it. So we appreciate you playing along.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me here. This has just been really healing for me. I know that there's pieces of my story that there was still kind of some shame hanging around, and just being able to recount all of these things in my life has just been really healing for me. So I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Well, we loved it. We really did enjoy it. And I think we're going to walk away with a lot of good stuff from this episode. So thank you so much for being brave enough to reach out, for coming on the show, for sharing your story. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in today, guys. We really want to heavily encourage you guys to do your 5-second missionary work, hit that share button, get Tanya's story out there so that it can help other people, and go check out her podcast. Tell us again, what's the name of your podcast, Tanya?
5-Minute Habits for Mom, and it's on iTunes and Spotify and a bunch of other ones.
Okay, perfect. 5-minute. What was it called?
5-minute habits for moms.
Habits for moms. 5-minute habits for moms. Okay, perfect. Yeah, go check it out, guys, and make sure you comment. Let us know what you're taking away from today's story. And if you have a story that you guys would like to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others, we definitely want to hear from you. So please head over to latterdaylights.com, fill out the form at the bottom of the page, or if you need to just reach out to us directly. Scott and I try really hard to make sure that we read all of the comments from videos and wherever we're streaming and whatever else. We do try to follow up on that. So drop a comment if you want to, and just say, hey, I think I have a story, reach out to me, and we'd be more than happy to do that. So with that, anything else, Scott?
No, I think we're good. Thanks so much, Tanya. And
thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will talk to you again next week with another story. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.